good day. We'll tackle the first lesson of your finals, the Module 7, Cellular and Humoral Response. So let's begin. Now, please take note, class, that the bone marrow would constantly produce cells that would become your lymphocytes. So if you still remember, diba, the bone marrow would produce two types of lymphocytes, the small lymphocyte and your NK cell. Now, the small lymphocyte class would either become your B cell by staying in the bone marrow, or it would become a T cell by going to the thymus. Some will enter the bloodstream, but most will move through your lymphatic system. So once they have become your B cell, they would become T cell. Both of this class would go to your circulation, and they would go now to the lymph nodes, to the spleen or the secondary lymphoid organs. And if they encounter an antigen, they would go to the site of injury or the site of infection. But if there is no antigen, they will just return or would recirculate. They would just return or they would just recirculate peripheral in the peripheral blood or the blood circulation. So do take note of that. Now, about 25% of the new lymphocytes would remain in the bone marrow and would become T cell, while the other 75% would travel to the thymus and would become your T cells. So 25% plus 1/4 would become B cell, and 75% or 3/4 would become T cells. Just a quick recap, class, of your module 2. So, diba, we have the three barriers. So we'll just focus on the last two. The natural immune system, yung second line defense. The cellular components would include your mast cells, neutrophils, and macrophages, while the humoral would include the complement, the lysozyme, and interferon. And the last line of defense, yung adaptive immune system natin. This is the third line of defense, and the cellular component would include the T lymphocytes. While for the humoral, they would include the cytokines, the B cells, plasma cells, and antibodies. So do memorize the different components, class, of each line of defense. Let's start with your adaptive immunity. Now, the adaptive immunity, class, can result in the elimination of microorganisms and recovery from disease. Hosts would often acquire a specific immunologic memory. So if you still remember, di ba, class, when we talk about your adaptive immunity, if you recover from the disease, you would develop this so-called memory, immunologic memory, which would allow a faster immune response the next time you are infected again with the same pathogen. So allow faster immune response if infected with the same disease. As with natural immunity, it is composed of both cellular and humoral components. The major cellular component of acquired immunity, class, is the lymphocyte, specifically the T cells, class. And the major humoral component are the antibodies involving the B cells. So pakitandaan to, class, ha. The major cellular component of acquired immunity, cellular component, ha. Let me emphasize that. Major cellular component of acquired immunity is the T cell, while the major humoral component are the antibodies or the B cells. B cells or antibodies are acceptable. So do remember that. Now let's talk about the first one, yung second barrier, cell-mediated immunity. So mediated, class, by T cells, but would involve the NK cells and the macrophages as well. An immune response that does not involve antibodies. Important in viral and fungal infections, in acid-fast bacilli infections such as your TB and leprosy, and in transplant rejections. Involved in your delayed hypersensitivity. So kapag cell-mediated immunity class, it involves the T cells, the NK cells, macrophages. No antibodies involved. Important in viral and fungal infection, acid-fast bacilli infections, and transplant rejection, as well as in your delayed hypersensitivity. Then for the T cells class, these are your T lymphocytes. This is the chief lymphocyte in the blood and the lymph. Diba they are 75%. Siya yung may pinakamadami, 3/4. They have a long lifespan. They are thymus dependent. They require the thymus to differentiate and mature. And functions would involve in cell-mediated immune response through the help of T helper and T inducer cells. Regulate the production of antibodies by B cell through the help of your T suppressor cell and may act directly with the antigen T cytotoxic. So pakitandaan class, when it comes to your T cells, there are two types. Yung T helper, yung T cytotoxic, in some books tatlo. But tayo kasi let's just use the two. It's either T cytotoxic yan class or suppressor. Sa ibang books tatlo yan, but sa atin dalawa lang. You could also use the three if you want. But do take note lang that your T helper are also known as your T inducer. T helper or T inducer class is involved in cell-mediated immune response. Si T suppressor naman regulates production of antibody. Si T cytotoxic acts directly with the antigen. So, depending on the type of T cell, meron siyang mga iba-ibang function. So, kapag T helper or inducer involved in cell-mediated, kapag T suppressor regulates production of antibodies. Kapag T cytotoxic may act directly with the antigen. I'll just skip this part class since aware naman na kayo dito. But sige. Ito yung lymphoid stem cell nyo which would develop into an NK cell or your large granular lymphocyte or your small lymphocyte. Small lymphocyte would become a T cell, B cell, then B cell would become plasma cell. So, T cell maturation. So, sa T cell maturation class, iba-iba yung kanyang stages. And these stages class are determined by CD markers. Diba ang CD markers nyo are found on the surface. Found on the surface of the cell. So, halimbawa, for a double negative stage, it has no CD4 and CD8 on the cell surface. Kapag double positive, has CD4 and CD8 present. Kapag mature T cell, it could have either CD4 or CD8. So kapag mature T cell class, please take note of this, has either CD4 or CD8. Now, 2/3 of the lymphocyte are CD4 positive, and they are known as T helper or inducer cells. So let me repeat. 2/3 of the T cells are CD4 positive. Meaning class, meron silang CD4 sa kanilang surface, but there is no CD8. And they are known as T helper or inducer cell. While 1/3 naman of the T lymphocytes are CD8 positive, but no CD4, and they are known as cytotoxic and suppressor cells. So kapag tinanong kayo sa quiz nyo class, what lymphocyte has CD4 positive on its surface? The answer is your T helper or T inducer. Kapag naman tinanong kayo, what lymphocyte is CD8 positive? The answer is cytotoxic and suppressor. Then we have also your activated T cell. This is the one that is CD25 positive. Remember, kapag activated class, they are the ones that have already encountered an antigen. So kapag naka-encounter na sila ng antigen, they would now become CD25 positive. So do take note of it. So pag tinanong kayo, what are the characteristics of an activated T helper? CD25 positive, CD4 positive. So ganun. Basta pag kailangan may CD25 for it to be considered activated T cell. So this is your lymphoid stem cell. So mag-focus lang tayo dito sa left side, dito sa thymocytes. So when your lymphoid stem cell class, please take note of the CD markers. Meron siyang HLA-DR, CD38, CD34, CD10. Now, when your lymphoid stem cell develops into your small lymphocyte, the first thing is that it would become your pro-T lymphocyte. So pro-T lymphocyte. Your pro-T lymphocyte class has cytoplasmic CD3. So dito sa cytoplasm niya, may CD3 dyan. On the surface, it has CD5, CD7. So pag tinanong kayo, what is the characteristic of your pro-T lymphocyte? It has cytoplasmic CD3, surface CD5, CD7. After that, it would now become an early thymocyte. Again, it would have a cytoplasmic CD3. And on the surface class, from the original CD5 and 7, magkakaroon ng additional CD2, CD38, CD71. So ulitin ko ha, the first stage class kapag pro-T cell, may cytoplasmic CD3, sa surface may CD5, CD7. After that, it would develop into an early thymocyte. Pag early thymocyte, meron pa rin siyang cytoplasmic CD3, may CD5, may CD7. But this time, may nadagdag. May CD2 na, may CD38, may CD71. After becoming an early thymocyte, it would now become your common thymocyte. Si common thymocyte class would have the following surface markers: CD1, CD2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 38, and 71. So yung cytoplasmic CD3 nyo, wala na siya sa cytoplasm. Nasa surface na siya. Now, this would differentiate into two. Pwede siyang maging T helper, pwede siyang maging T cytotoxic or suppressor. Again, kapag T helper class, CD4 positive. Walang CD8. So, tingnan natin. CD2, CD3, CD4 class. CD5, CD7. Walang CD8. While your HLA-DR, CD45RA, CD28. Pag naman cytotoxic or suppressor sa class, CD2, CD3, CD4, CD5, CD7, CD8. So parehong may CD4, may CD8 class. CD45RA and CD5, CD28. Becoming T cytotoxic or T suppressor. Ano lang dito class kapag si CD4 or sa T helper nyo, CD4 positive siya. CD4 positive siya, no CD8. Kapag naman si cytotoxic sa suppressor, no HLA-DR. So do remember those difference. Paki-memorize class yung different markers, they may come out in your quiz or exam. Now let's go to the different subpopulations one by one. The first one class is the CD4 positive, also known as your T helper or your T inducer. Now the A and B cell differentiation stimulates other T cell population and macrophage activation by cytokines. So siya yung tumutulong class for your B cell to either become a plasma cell or a memory cell. It also stimulates other T cell population. So, tumutulong siya maging activated yung T cytotoxic, T suppressor, and macrophage activation by cytokines. They process antigen class so that it can be presented to the circulation pool of B lymphocytes. So, siya yung tumutulong class na ma-present yung antigen sa mga B cells. Now, there are two types of T helper. Yung tinatawag nating T helper 1 and T helper 2. Si T helper 1 class differentiate in the presence of your interferon gamma. Activates macrophages promotes clearance of bacteria. Produces interleukin-2 and interferon gamma. So pakitandaan class, ang T helper 1 nyo is in the presence, magdi-differentiate lang siya or mangyayari lang siya or made-develop lang siya if there is the presence of interferon gamma. Activates macrophages, promotes the clearance of bacteria, produces interleukin-2 and interferon gamma. While si T helper 2 naman class would predominate in the presence of interleukin-4. So kailangan ng interleukin-4 class for T helper 2 to be activated. It activates mast cells, eosinophils, and causes B cells to synthesize IgE. Responds to helminthic infection. Secretes interleukin-4, 5, 9, and 13. So kapag tinanong kayo what causes the creation of T helper 1, interferon gamma. What causes the creation of T helper 2, interleukin-4. Now, ang tatandaan nyo dito, class, si T helper 1 is most common kapag meron kang bacterial infection. So, siya yung subpopulation ng T helper that is most involved in bacterial infection. While your T helper 2 naman class is the type of subpopulation involved in allergic reactions and parasitic infections. So kapag tinanong kayo what subpopulation of your T helper is involved in your bacterial infection, it's your T helper 1. Kapag allergy or parasitic, it's your T helper 2. Pag tinanong kayo what produces or what is produced by your T helper 1, interleukin-2, interferon gamma. What is produced by T helper 2, interleukin-4, 5, 9, and 13. Let's go to the another type of subpopulation. Yung CD8 positive naman. So this is the one that has both CD4 and CD8. Excuse me, class. First one would be your cytotoxic T cell or the CD8 positive. This is responsible class of virus, lysis of virus-infected cell, tumor cells, and allografts. Macrophage activation by cytokines. Secretes lymphotoxin, releases perforins which destroys foreign cells. So si cytotoxic nyo class is most common in virus infections, cancer or tumor cells, and allografts. Secretes lymphotoxins, releases perforins which destroy foreign cells. Then we also have your suppressor T cell. Produces factors that inhibit the action of other T cell, and sila yung nagre-regulate class. They regulate or they turn off B lymphocytes so they can no longer cooperate with normal T cells to produce an immune response. So they regulate B cells so they can no longer create or produce an immune response. So no more antibody production. So to take note of that. Then another subpopulation class is yung TREG, also known as your regulatory T cell. This has both CD4 and CD25 positive. This is approximately 5 to 10% of all CD4 positive T cell. Plays an important role in suppressing the immune response to self antigens. Pakitandaan class sa self antigens. Sila yung nagre-regulate against self-antigens. They would produce interleukin-10 and TGF, transforming growth factor B, TGF-B, which switches off the immune system. Presence of T regulatory cells is necessary to prevent autoimmune response. So, pakitandaan, pag T helper 1, bacterial. Pag T helper 2, allergies or parasitic. Kapag T cytotoxic, viruses, tumors, allografts. Kapag T suppressor, regulates creation of antibodies. And kapag TREG, auto antigens. So those are the things you need to take note of the subpopulations ng T cell. as well as the different surface marker. Then let's go to the NK cell class. The natural killer cell nyo, also known as the large granular lymphocyte. These are cells class with cytolytic activity, and FC receptors are able to directly lyse antibody-coated, usually IgG, and virus-infected cells. Binding would occur through CD16 receptor for IgG. Any targeted cell coated with IgG can be bound and destroyed through the antibody-dependent cell cytotoxicity. Okay, yung NK cell nyo class, for it to destroy an antigen, it would require the presence of an antibody, specifically an IgG. And this action is known as your antibody-dependent cell cytotoxicity. From the words antibody-dependent, they would require the antibody to destroy it. So, ang mangyayari dyan, class, it would attach class to the CD16 receptor ng IgG nyo. So, for you to understand that, dito tayo sa second slide. Okay. Ito yung ADCC na sinasabi. So, the first one is that antibodies, specifically class yung IgG, would bind to antigens on the cell surface. Now, kapag nakapag-bind na sila class, ganito na yung itsura nila. You have your antibody-antigen binding. Dadating ngayon si NK cell. NK cell would now attach to the CD16 FC receptor. So, dito sa FC part, CD16 FC receptors would recognize the cell-bound antibodies. So, ito yung receptor na yun. This is the CD16. The CD16 FC receptors, babound siya ngayon dun sa FC region. Then it would form a cross-linking of CD16. Pag nag-cross-linking yan, attach. Magko-cross-link yan class, attach siya dun sa mga parts ng antibodies. This would now trigger a degranulation. So yung mga granules niya, diba, this is known as the large granular lymphocyte. Yung mga granules niya sa loob, maglalabas kayo class. Lalabas yan, it would now enter through the antigen, through the bacteria. And that would cause the tumor cell to die by apoptosis. So ulitin ko class, ADCC is a part of your NK cell on how it would destroy antigens, specifically with the help of antibodies such as your IgG. So IgG would first bind to the antigens of the surface of the target cell. After that, your NK cell will arrive. Sa surface ni NK cell, merong CD16 FC receptor. Mag-a-attach yan ngayon sa FC region ng antibody. After that class, magkakaroon ng cross-linking. When you say cross-linking, yung ibang FC receptors niya, yung CD16 FC receptors, will also attach to other antibodies. Magli-link sila. And that would trigger ngayon a degranulation. Yung mga granules doon sa NK cell will be released, causing a lytic synapse. Maglalay siya. And this would occur and this would cause your tumor cells to die by apoptosis. So, kusang mamamatay, programmed cell death ang mangyayari dun sa tumor cell. Now, let's talk about your antigen-presenting cells. Ano ba itong mga antigen-presenting cells na ito? These are immune cells class that would detect, engulf, and inform the adaptive immune response about an infection. So, ito yung mga tinatawag nating mga phagocytes class. They mediate the cellular immune response by processing and presenting antigens for recognition by certain lymphocytes. Classical APCs would include dendritic cells, macrophages, Langerhans cells, and B cells. So, ito yung simplified form ng phagocytosis. Explanation, rather. A bacterium is engulfed by a macrophage, then it would be encased in a vacuole. Lysosomes would fuse with the vacuole and digest the bacterium. Antigens from digested bacterium are presented with MHC2 on the cell surface. So, gamit siyang MHC2 na yan, class, it would now be presented to the B cells and T cells. Kaya siya tinawag na antigen presenting cell. Now, there are two types of APCs. The first one is the professional, while the second one is your atypical. When you say professional class, they are the experts. They are the ones that would usually do this. The first one is your dendritic cells and macrophages. They are considered professional APCs. They are phagocytic. They express receptors for apoptotic cells, dumps, and pumps. And they are localized tissues, localized to the T cell zone of the lymph nodes following activation, specifically of your dendritic cell. So nakikita sila class sa zone, T cell zone ng lymph nodes nyo. You still remember kung saan yan, di ba? Then constitutively expresses high levels of MHC class 2 molecules and antigen processing machinery. Express co-stimulatory molecules following activation. Itong dumps and pumps na to class, pag sinabi mong dumps, this is what refer to your damage associated molecular pattern. Kapag naman pumps, this would refer to pathogen associated molecular pattern. So meron silang receptor for apoptotic cells, dumps and pumps. Another professional APC is yung B cells. They internalize antigens via the B cell receptor, constitutively express MHC class 2 molecules and antigen processing machinery. Express co-stimulatory molecules following activation. Then we have your atypical APCs. They include mast cells, basophils, eosinophils, and ILC3s. Key features class would include inducible expression of MHC, MHC class 2 molecules, antigen presenting functions limited to specific immune environments, especially type 2 immune settings, lack of compelling evidence that they can activate naive CD4 positive T cells in an antigen specific manner. So, inducible expression class. So, kailangan for this to occur para magkaroon sila ng MHC class 2, kailangan muna nilang maka-encounter ng antigen. Then, antigen presenting function is limited to specific immune environments. So, onting environment lang, not all environments class magiging activated sila. Then, lack of compelling evidence that they can activate naive CD4 T cells in an antigen specific manner. So, ito siya. This is how your APCs would work. So, please take note class that itong green na to, this is your APC. Now, si APC nyo class would have the MHC class 2. Si MHC class 2 naman class, si MHC class 2 naman would be presenting the antigen molecules, itong mga to the T cell via the so-called T cell receptors. And this will cause your immature CD4 positive T cell to become a mature T helper cell, either T helper 1 or T helper 2. So ulitin ko class ha. You have here your antigen presenting cell, na process nyo na yung antigen. He will now present it to the T cell via the T cell receptor, specifically the immature CD4 positive cell. This will cause your CD4 positive cell to become mature helper T cell, either T helper 1 or T helper 2. This is known as the exogenous pathway for your CD4. Another pathway is the endogenous naman. Endogenous naman will deal with the CD8 positive. Same lang din class, but this time, ang gagamitin nyo is MHC class 1. MHC class 1 will present it to the T cell receptor and it would cause your CD8 immature CD8 positive cell to become a mature cytotoxic T cell. So do take note of the different pathways class for CD4 and CD8 respectively. And phagocytosis. So macrophages would carry out the fundamental functions of ingesting and killing invading microorganisms such as intracellular parasite, M. tuberculosis, and some fungi. A process wherein a cell would bind to the item that it wants to engulf on the cell surface and would draw the item inward while engulfing around it. So ito yun. So chemotaxis and adherence of microbe to phagocyte, ingestion of microbe to phagocyte, formation of phagosome, phagosome with a lysosome forming your phagolysosome, digestion of ingested microbe by enzyme, formation of residual body containing indigestible material, discharge of waste materials. So do take note of the process class. Na-discuss ko naman na to, so I won't elaborate much on it. Okay, let's continue with the humoral immunity. So we're done with the cellular. So cellular class was all about your T cells. This time, let's go to the humoral, specifically yung mga B cells. Now, the humoral immunity class, please take note, is antibody-mediated immunity. This is mediated by B cells and your cytokines. With assistance from helper T cells, B cells will differentiate into plasma cells that can produce antibodies against a specific antigen. So please take note, class, si helper T cell nyo is the one that helps B cells to become a plasma B cell. It involves immunoglobulin or antibody production. So B cells would recognize certain substances as foreign, and they would then transform into plasma cells, which would synthesize antibodies. Now, cytokines class, please take note, are small proteins that are crucial in controlling the growth and activity of other immune system cells and blood cells. They help to boost anti-cancer activity by sending signals class that can help make abnormal cells die and normal cells live longer. Your chemokines naman class can make immune cells move toward a target, such as interleukin, interferon, TNF, and your growth factors. So pakitandaan class, cytokines would cause death to abnormal cells and normal cells to live longer. While chemokines class, sila yung nagkakos ng movement. If you still remember via chemotaxis, di ba? Now, the most common type class of cytokines are your interleukins and interferons. Go to your B cells class this time. So B cells class are technically thymos independent. They do not need the thymos to mature. Differentiation and maturation would occur in the bone marrow. They have a short lifespan. Kaya nga sila class, they tend to be only 1/4 of your lymphocytes. Now, with assistance from helper T cells, B cells will differentiate into plasma B cells that can produce antibodies against a specific antigen. Sila. A B cell maturation, similar with your T cell class, they also have different stages. And you would be able to identify them based on their CD markers. So we have your pro B cell. This has CD19, CD45R, and CD24. We have your pre B cell. This has CD19, CD24, CD45R, and they would have mu chains or IgM in the cytoplasm. Then we have your immature B cell class, CD19, CD24, CD45R, IgM molecules on the surface, CD21, CD40, and MHC class 2. Okay, if you take a look at this class, yung pro B cell saka pre B cell nyo, they would start first with these three original. Ito yung three original markers class found in your B cell, 19, 45R, 24. Now, kapag naging pre-B cell siya class, it starts developing chains. If you still remember in your immunoglobulin, in your module 6, di ba yung pre-B cell doon, may makikita kayo mga chains doon sa cytoplasm. That is the mu chains or IgM. So, merong CD19, 24, 45R, then may mu chains na sa IgM. Now, once they become an immature B cell, same markers pa din, 19, 24, 45R, but this time, meron na siyang IgM molecules sa surface niya. Then additional markers, CD21, CD40, and MHC class 2. Once it becomes a mature B cell, it would have your CD19, CD24, CD45R, IgM, and IgD molecules on the surface, CD21, 40, and MHC class 2. So, sa immature class, wala pang IgD. Pero sa mature, nagkaroon na ng IgD. Then, activated B cell would have the addition of the marker CD25. So, kapag naka-encounter din siya ng antigen class, magkakaroon ng CD25. Then, plasma cells would produce antibodies and they are no longer dividing. So, yun na yung last stage class. Hindi na siya kayang mag-differentiate pa. Hindi na siya magde-divide pa. Then, another type, if hindi siya maging plasma cell, they could become memory cells. Memory cells class are found in germinal centers. They have a longer lifespan than your B cells, capable of responding to antigen with increased speed and intensity. So, those are the different B cell stages and their markers. So, dito tayo sa left side class pag-focus. So, this is your lymphoid stem cell. If it's going to become your B cell, it would start with your pro-B lymphocyte. So, you have your HLA-DR, CD38, 34, 19, and 10. And immunoglobulin heavy chain rearranged. After your pro-B cell, it would become a pre-B cell. It would have immunoglobulin heavy chain rearranged, immunoglobulin light chain rearranged, and it would have your cytoplasmic mu chain. Meron siyang CD19, CD20, HLA-DR. Then early B cell, IG heavy chain rearranged, IG light chain rearranged, and IgM, IgD sa surface. This is made up of surface markers HLA-DR, 22, 20, and 19. Now, ito class would either become an activated B cell or plasma cell. So, kapag activated B cell siya class, HLA-DR, 25, 23, 22, 20, 19. Pag plasma cell siya, the only marker found is CD38. It would have immunoglobulin heavy chain rearranged, IG light chain rearranged, cytoplasmic immunoglobulin. So do try to memorize this class, the different markers. They may come out in your quiz or exam. Comparison of your T cell and B cell. So T cells would develop in the thymus, B cells would develop in the bone marrow. T cells are 60 to 80%, B cells are 20 to 30%. T cells are identified by rosette formation with SHIP-RBC through CD2, and B cells are identified by surface immunoglobulin. End products of activation are cytokines for T cell, and products of activation for B cells are antibodies. Antigens would include CD2, 3, 4, and 8 for the T cell, while for the B cell, antigens would include 19, 20, 21, 40, MHC class 2. You may be wondering, sir, bakit antigens yung tawag dyan? Remember class, diba, another definition of antigens are, they are also known as markers. They are also known as markers or receptors found in the surface of the cell. Sila yung mga ina-atake or nag-a-attach doon. Then the T cells are located in the paracortex of the lymph nodes, while the B cells are found in the cortex of the lymph nodes. So do again memorize this table. It may come out in your quiz. Now let's talk about the T cell independent activation of B cell. So when you say T cell independent, meaning class, the B cell will be activated. Ma-activate siya class without your T cells. So activation of B cells without the cooperation of helper T cells. So walang helper T cell this time class. Occurs when B cell receptors would interact with T-independent antigens. Involves cross-linkage of B cell receptors by repetitive non-protein antigen epitopes. Characterized by the production of IgM by plasma cells and does not produce memory B cell. So ito siya. This is the T cell independent activation. So if you notice, there is no helper T cell. So this is your B cell class. When your B cell with the cytoplasmic, with the different immunoglobulins found on the surface, it encounters a polysaccharide antigen with repeating epitopes. Paulit-ulit class na similar epitopes. This can cause the activation of B cell and the secretion of pentameric IgM. So please take note of that. Nangyayari lang tong T cell. T cell independent activation of B cells will only occur if it encounters a polysaccharide antigen with repeating epitopes. And that would lead to the activation of the B cell and secretion of pentameric IgM. No memory cell creation. Let's talk about naman the T cell dependent activation. So this is more complex than T cell independent, but the resulting immune response is stronger and develops memory. Can occur either in response to pre-protein antigens or protein antigens associated with an intact pathogen. So ulitin ko class, they would occur in response to free protein antigen or to protein antigens associated with an intact pathogen. The B cell would recognize and internalize an antigen and present it to a helper T cell that is specific to the same antigen. Ayan siya. So here class is your B cell. Your B cell with the help of your BCR, may B cell receptor yan. It would cause the attachment. So mag-a-attach yung antigen dun sa B cell receptor. Using that antigen class, it would be presented. Ipe-present yan ngayon to the T cells via the T cell receptor. Si T cells yun naman, i-digest yan and it would be secreted again to the MHC class 2, causing the activation of B cells. And the activated B cells would either become a memory or a plasma cell. So ulitin ko class, this can occur in two ways. If it encounters an intact antigen, specifically a protein type. So tulad nito, naka-encounter siya, it would cause the activation of your B cell to either undergo a memory B cell or a plasma cell. The other one would be via the help of your T helper. Si T helper nyo, which contains already the molecules, antigen molecules, specifically the protein one, will present it with the help of the MHC class 2 to the B cell. And the B cell would become memory B cell or plasma cell. So do take note of it. So ito yung difference class. Let's talk about first yung T-dependent. So here you have your B cell. When it encounters a protein antigen, it would cause the activation or the help of your helper T cell with the help of the MHC class 2. And that would cause isotype switching, high affinity antibody, memory B cell, long-lived plasma cell. Kapag naman T-independent, walang helper T cell, it would occur in the presence of polysaccharide antigen. So IgM plus the polysaccharide antigen will cause the creation of IgM. Only IgM class walang other antibodies kapag T-independent. Low affinity antibodies, short-lived plasma cell. So that ends the module 7. Thank you.